It'll come as no surprise to many of you that I'm not a white man. Jonathan, who should have been here from the Power Orchestra, unfortunately has come down with COVID. As much as we want to put it behind us, we are still living in a pandemic. So I know that's a great shame for Jonathan, but it's a great opportunity for me. So swings and roundabouts, you know. It also means I'm slightly less prepared than I might have been on other occasions, but I'll do my best. So I'm going to do kind of 10 minutes to start off with, just on what Unlimited is and also what ambition and quality mean to us. So Unlimited began with the Cultural Olympiad back in 2012. It was part of the bid to create something that would do for disabled artists what the Paralympics did for disabled athletes, to shine a spotlight, to invest, to give heightened resource. At the end of London 2012, it was decided by Arts Council to create a programme, a commissions programme that would continue that work. A tender was put out. I was part of a team that won that tender, along with Shape Arts and Arts Admin, and we ran as a programme for 8 or 9 years. Last year, we took the bold step of becoming an independent organisation, relocating to Wakefield, which is not that far from Bradford. Nice little easy drive in this morning. And we're still doing the same thing. What we're doing is investing in disabled artists to create exceptional and amazing and incredible work until the rest of the cultural sector does. We don't want to be here. We shouldn't have to be here. There shouldn't have to be a programme that is specific for disabled artists. Disabled artists should be embedded in everybody else's programmes, residencies, commission processes, activities, years of whatever. Disabled people make up over 22% of the population. There has never been a time when disabled people have made up anywhere over 12% of any sector of the cultural, any part of the cultural sector. I think the latest Arts Council statistics are around 8% in some areas. So we don't want to be here. And our ambition, if we had to state our ambition is to close. When everybody else steps up, when everybody else gets the message that a fifth of what you're doing should involve disabled people directly, not just audiences, but artists, participants, writers, directors, producers, not just at the very kind of lower tier of, passive spectators, but actually as creatives as well, and leaders and, visionaries within the work that you do. So that's our ambition. How we measure that is actually really hard. I promised I won't swear. I'm going to try really hard not to swear. It's really hard to kind of measure that shift. There are still many disabled creatives who don't own the word disabled, who fear it will damage their career prospects. So, aren't necessarily out and about around that, and that's absolutely their right to be so. But it does make gathering that data often quite difficult. Quality is a whole other area. How do we judge the quality of what we fund and the quality of what we do? I think the first thing I'd say, for Unlimited, there isn't a single definable measure of quality. It's entirely dependent in terms of an artwork and what that artwork is, the genre that it's in, the relationship that it's in, and crucially, what the artist intends that work to do. That's how we can measure the quality of it. It's about, have they achieved what they set out to do within that piece of work? And quite often for us, it's not always, the artists that we support, it's not always about making a brilliant piece of work that gets loads of bums on seats. Quite often it's about engaging with a couple of key venues who've ignored them for a really long time. Or it's about using enhanced resources or a level of resources they've not been able to access before to stretch into increased production values or a way of doing something that they haven't been able to afford to do before, with a level of care, perhaps, that they haven't been able to put in place. Sometimes that nature of what an artist wants to do is about stretching into a completely different audience. I'm thinking about Bobby Baker, who's at Leeds 2023 as a co-commission that we're doing there. Very much about embracing the new elements of social media, which for an older artist is a real interesting and vibrant area being able to kind of take on. So we define quality in relation to something that's really specific, defined by that artist or that company themselves. How do we define quality in terms of what we do as an organisation? We go back to our values. So our values are, we're unlimited, and by that it means we don't want to be tethered by preconceived notions of how things have to be done or what disabled people can do or are expected to do. We value equity rather than equality, because we think different people need different things in order to progress forward. We value artists, so putting them front and centre within our processes rather than way down the line. And we're radical, which is quite a difficult word to choose because it has some negative connotations. We couldn't find anything that we felt described what we wanted to do better, so we stuck with radical. And we also really struggle with, are we being radical enough? Are we making enough change? Are we challenging enough? But when we say radical, we mean we will ask the difficult question. We will provoke. We will nudge. We will, hopefully with a smile, try and push that change agenda as much as we can. For many disabled artists, actually being an artist is a radical act. Being a disabled artist is ambitious. You're told from the point, literally, of diagnosis that you will have to limit your ambitions. I always wanted to be a Blue Peter presenter. I'm delighted there will finally be a disabled Blue Peter presenter coming up soon. That's just like amazing. I'm gutted it's not me. I think I'm now too old, I believe, to take on that role. But there's something that's really important about that representation, about being able to see yourself within the sector that you want to work in. So to be a disabled artist, you have to already discount the stereotypes and discount the negativity and push that away. And we say that 22% of the population are disabled people. They're not having an easy time. A third of all the deaths from COVID have been disabled people. It actually meant the numbers of disabled people dropped for the first time ever last year. They've gone up this year because of long COVID. More people have joined us. Yay. Disability hate crime has gone up. The employment gap between disabled people and non-disabled people is 29%. The barriers are really significant, and they're really out there, and that's what we're here to create. So the ambition is not just to take disabled artists through a system that actively discriminates against them, but it's to encourage them to truly create incredible work. Because actually we believe that access and a unique vision and a unique starting point can create better work, and work that is of a higher quality than work that comes through more mediocre processes. We genuinely believe that. And I think I'm just going to mention the Power Orchestra, and then I'll shut up for a bit. Because we funded The Nature of Why, which was one of their pieces, which is brilliant. I'm really pleased it's being remounted and going back on tour this year. And they said to us, it's not about numbers. We don't want to fill auditoriums. We can do that, but that's not what we want to do. We actually want to dissect kind of what an orchestra is and change the relationship between audience and performers. It's on stage. Everybody's on stage. There's an equality within the experience of that piece. It means it limits numbers, which is actually really annoying in some ways when people wanted to book it and didn't feel it reached enough people for their budgets. But it means you get upfront and personal with the artists. And actually, for many of those disabled musicians, that was really essential too, because there's often a disconnect between working on stage and the audiences that you serve. And that piece really takes that away. So what they achieved, the quality they aimed for, the thing that they wanted, was to break that down, which they really, really did. But how do we start to quantify that if we can't do it through numbers? And if we insist on doing it through an outmoded and outdated reviews system, where the people who are reviewing are very one lens, if you like. There's a very typical style within many art forms of people who review work. We were chatting earlier, we're not the experts on this investment principle. We have no more right to sit up here and pontificate about what we do than anybody else in this room. So this really is a conversation. I can explain what we're doing and the thinking behind us. We're curious about it. It really matters to us. But we are learning all the time, and we're making mistakes all the time too. And I want to be really, really kind of open about that. But quality matters, and ambition matters. And part of that is because the expectations on disabled artists are so low. Most people applaud if you clean your teeth. It's kind of like, we've got to get out of that mindset. We've got to actually look for what does the artist want, have they achieved it, and how much change can we make within the sector. I'm going to stop there for a bit.
First of all, I'm going to say welcome to Bradford. Jo has very kindly stepped in to join me in this conversation. This is a conversation. And we both of us wanted to give you an introduction to our organisations, our approach, and what it is that we're trying to do. How I follow what Jo has just said, when I agree with everything, and our approach at 2025 is from very much that perspective. Some of you have heard me speak before, so some of you know some of our themes and what our approach is, but I'm going to start with, it's taken Bradford 20 years to get to this point. 20 years. And when we say City of Culture, we say Bradford, UK City of Culture. Because often, it's UK's over here and Bradford is over here. And we all know the narrative that if you say you're from Bradford, there's like, really? And then there's that story of, well, you don't sound like you're from Bradford. You don't look like you're from Bradford. You don't behave like. So my question was immediately, so what does somebody sound, look, or behave like if they're from Bradford? And when the bid was put together for City of Culture, for the UK City of Culture, I'm going to keep reiterating UK City of Culture, because UK's here, Bradford's bang in the middle of it. Literally, bang in the middle of it. When we were pulling the bid together to be UK City of Culture, we knew that we, first of all, had to convince ourselves. We had to do that, hearts and minds, on ourselves, that we can do it, we have the ambition, we have the quality, we have the principles, we have the values, we have the artists, we have the audiences, we have some venues, we have mills, we have hills, and we have a hugely, hugely talented sector. We have audiences. The rest of the sector doesn't sit over there and Bradford sits here. We are all one sector. Our City of Culture bid was about bringing us into that space first, and then the rest of the UK to go, oh, hang on a second, Bradford's fantastic. Bradford's got amazing, kind of writers. Did we know that Brontes were in Bradford? You ask most people, they think the Brontes aren't from Bradford. But I'm just going to point out women disguising themselves as men in order to be published, that's Bradford. Birth of the labour movement, Bradford. Free school meals, Bradford. Reinvention of textiles industry, Bradford. At one time, richest city in the world, Bradford. We don't even know a lot of that story ourselves. We don't even know ourselves. So how do we tell that story of Bradford if we don't even know some of that ourselves? 20 years of a particular narrative around Bradford, 20 years of a particular vision around Bradford. At any point, if there's a particular story that needs to be told about a particular community, we'll come to Bradford. There's so much more here. And you guys are all here on a Monday morning in Bradford because we are the UK city of culture. When we started to think about how we were going to tell our narrative, tell our story, we had one very, very key, very kind of powerful and secret, not so secret weapon. We're the youngest city in the UK. A population of 542,000, out of which 26% is under 18. There's an image that if you type in Bradford wins UK City of Culture, and that photo is of young people literally screaming with joy. And you can see it. That photo is what wakes me up every night. That photo is what drives me on a Monday. The fact that I'm here talking to you about 2025 means the rest of the week it's going to be long, because I'll just walk out of here thinking about responsibility and accountability to that photo, to those young people. Because on the 31st of May, that scream reverberated across the UK. So our themes were developed with those young people in mind, with our district in mind, with ourselves in mind, and hopefully recognising that what is happening in Bradford is for the UK. We are the youngest city in the UK, therefore we had to be thinking about coming of age. There was a brilliant campaign in Bradford, all the Bradfordians will know this, it's called Bradford Bouncing Back. I think that ball's finally dropping. I think most of us were going, when's it bouncing, when's it coming, when's it coming? It's now, it's here. It is our time and it is our place. So it's a coming of age for Bradford, it's a coming of age for our young people, and it's a coming of age of taking risks. Calculated risks. So if you've got a theme that says coming of age, who should actually deliver it? Is it going to be me at my age going, you know what, I've come of age? Well, one thing I will say to our young people, and I'm going to ask a question, everybody in this audience, who has actually come of age? Had a feeling that that would happen. I was at an event last week where someone actually put their hand up and says, I need to talk to you. Because I'd love to know at what point you decided. But we're all coming of age. So that ask of our young people and that invitation to our young people is also, you don't have to have it figured out at 18. You don't need to know. You don't need to hold all the answers. It's a journey. I'm still coming of age, but I'm not going to deliver that theme. I'm going to work with a group of young curators, young people of Bradford. Give them the framework, the infrastructure, work with some of the fantastic talent that we have in this room, and I'm looking at all of you, Bradford and National, but also giving them a framework and a structure, not a straitjacket. It's not about tying anybody's arms and them going, I have an idea. You might not be what you want, though. What I want them to be confident and strong enough, and for me to, and my team to have created that space, is for them to say, I have an idea, I think you're going to love it. So no need for apology. Which brings me to our second theme. And during the bid period, it was everything is connected, but I always talk about it as STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths. We all need the access to our imagination to be able to see ourselves outside of sometimes from where we start. I would say that most people who are sat in this room wouldn't have thought that they would be doing what they're doing today. But you needed to be able to see it to be it. And your imagination helps you do that. Our young people are not getting arts as part of their curriculum in the same way that we did growing up. So how can we kind of remove how can we kind of allow the imagination and the access to the imagination to be removed from every single day that our child is at school? So we need to be seeing ourselves as STEAM-powered. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths. It makes a fist. Fingers break if they're by themselves, don't they? A fist very rarely does. So art sits at the heart of absolutely every single thing, day in, day out. The clothes we wear, the food we eat, the programs we watch. It's not just about the art galleries. When you talk to people, they go, yeah, but art's in the art galleries, art's in the theatre, arts is this, arts is that. It's not. It's absolutely everything we live and breathe day in, day out. You cannot take arts out of the way we live. So STEAM-powered. If I get to the end of 2025, and hopefully, you know, everyone's kind of going, yeah, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, it's not STEM, I'll be like, okay, I've done my job. That's it. There's a whole host of young curators, young artists, they're out there. We're seeing arts sat at the heart of everything. I've done my job. But that does bring me to our third theme. Third theme is City of the World. In the introduction, I talked to you a little bit about how Bradford sees itself, but also Bradford's history. We in Bradford need to tell our story better. Forget about shouting about it. We just need to tell it. We need to tell it better. We in the arts need to talk about us and tell our stories better. Not just shout, but actually tell them better. What we've seen happen over the last couple of weeks, the team playership and the team mentality of the sports sector, that's been phenomenal to see. We are that as well. Support each other, be there for each other, collaborate, and encourage change. We're not just a city of the world for our history, but we're also a city of the world for what this industry, the wool industry, allowed when it came to the invitation for people like my parents. Communities exist in this city as a result of industry. So we're not just the past, we're the present, but we're also the future. And our final theme, how many of you came in on into Bradford Interchange? It's not the most beautiful station in the world. I have decided to embrace and love the ugly, and I've decided that I love Bradford Interchange. That's quite hard. I know, most of you who came in know this. And I think somebody else must have had a similar mindset, because some of you must have seen that now rather nice graffiti. Still don't know who did that rather nice graffiti, but there was a scrawl. It didn't look like that before. Believe me, it was just like somebody had gone, and I'm not going to swear, oh, I forgot my girlfriend's present, it's her birthday, I told her it would be here, I know, welcome home sexy. That'll cover it. But actually, that's our fourth theme. We are welcoming home every difference, every person who thinks slightly differently, lives outside of the box, is a bit quirky, inventive, innovative. We embrace the challenge and the ugly within ourselves. Look at the society we're living through right now, and look at what we are living through right now. There are so many challenges, but we have to find a way of seeing some of the opportunity within that challenge, because otherwise it gets really hard. You just look down all the time. If you look up in Bradford, you actually see Bradford's history and Bradford's background. If you're just looking down, all you can see is your own feet and the puddles you're about to step into. So I'm asking all of us to look up, like that person did who thought, I'm just going to welcome my girlfriend back. I won't get into trouble. I've said welcome home sexy, and everybody's coming in on this. This is our DNA. Bradford recognises its difference. It's challenging, it's pushy, but we had to spend that journey 4 years during the bid to see ourselves and to recognise ourselves. And that's where we are today. Delivering the UK City of Culture 2025 is about ambition. The ambition in that bid, I kid you not, that drives me. It's not fuel in the car, it's the ambition in that bid. Quality, that question of whose quality, who determines what quality is? Is it the kind of the folk art that I grew up with, that was all men, by the way, that I would always sneak in trying to pretend that nobody could see me, but it was all men in my dad's living room singing folk art, which is from the hills of Kashmir. But who would consider that to be ambitious and full of quality? But believe me, if you're working in mills and that's what you can manage to do once a month in your homes, that's ambitious. Who determines that that's quality? Is it the audience in that room? Or is it reviewers and critics? Which actually brings us to our first question as well. So we came up with four questions. This is a conversation. At some point, if anybody's got, something else you want to join in and you want to say, please say it. Joe and I have given ourselves time to introduce ourselves and our organisations and approaches and our visions, but we're also going to interrupt each other because it's a conversation and we're not online, so it'll be easier. So we're going to start with our first question, which Joe's going to start with.
So we wanted to talk about who gets to decide what's good. And certainly within the work that we do, it's not me. What I like is my personal preference. It's not necessarily what is good. And there's nothing that means that I should get to decide things. So actually, I don't decide anything anymore. For our commissions, we have selection panels, always 51% disabled people. Often there's other people who are investing in that commissions within that room as well. Because actually we think a group of people having a conversation are going to come up with kind of better decisions than one particular individual who's going to bring all kinds of stereotypical and bias into that. But I don't know many programmers who are prepared to give away that power. And I want to know, how's it going to work in Bradford?
Well, when I said to Sir Phil Redmond, I went, basically, we're going to hand over that theme to young people. We're gonna not. It's not a sink or swim moment. We're not going to say, here you go off and do it. It goes back to what I said. It's kind of giving them space, giving them structure, not a straitjacket. We were talking about this earlier. Supporting them. It's not a case of you're going to do it because we want you to do it, and you're left on your own to fail or succeed. Yeah. Failure is part of it. You kind of, we don't, when we learn to walk, we fall and then we get back up again. When we're starting out in our careers, we make mistakes. Why is it when we kind of try and create opportunity, whether that's for young people, whether it's for diverse leadership, it's almost like you're not allowed to fail?
I think you're right, that support is critical. We started off, as a programme, we started off with just commissioning the work, and we thought the work would change the sector by itself. And what we find is that it didn't. And we now have 5 strands. So commission is our kind of core strand, it's what we do. And then we have develop, connect, support, and change. So develop, connect, and support are the ways that we can develop and support artists and connect them with the sector, and the way that we can develop and support the sector to connect with the artists. Everything is about changing the sector. That's where that one kind of fits in. So I can legitimately be here under my change agenda. I lead on change. But it means I can count the time that I'm here. It's not something I have to squeeze in. It's something that's critical to my role, and that's been really important for us.
You asked me a question earlier. Jo asked me a question. She said, when do you think we'll have created the change? When do you think we'll have seen the change? Do you think you've created the change you wanted to see? And that's a really interesting question, because I think when you've done one thing, that thing then throws up a whole load of other things that need to shift. And then you get to that point and you think, actually, that now needs to shift. And I really thought about that question, and I thought, and Jo said, so when did you start creating change? I said, I think from the moment I was born into my community, into my family, into a country that wasn't where my parents were born and brought up. And that change it's every single day.
And I think that links back to the who decides if something is good? Who decides if change is enough? Who decides? If you ask me, it will never be enough. It will never be good enough. If I look back, I can see that change has happened, but I can't judge it myself because I'm too angry. It's too far away from where I think things should be. So I don't think I've done anywhere near enough. I don't think that things have shifted enough.
I think when you start thinking, what does change look like and what is it? And the reason why when you're in the present, you can only see change when you've looked back is because in the present, you can only see what still needs to be done and what still needs to be shifted. It also brings us to who decides what change, who decides when it's the right moment for that particular change or transformation. It also brings us to, we talked about critics, reviewers, quality, ambition. That's what we're here talking about today. It also brings us to power balance.
Yeah, power's absolutely vital. For us, handing over power to decision-making panels was a really key step. But I think they make ridiculous decisions sometimes. I think they're wrong. But it's absolutely that panel's decision. And you can't hand over power and then take it back again. Do you think the power balance is right?
Well, that's a question I think every single person in this room is going to have a different answer on. Do I think the power balance is right? I think it's constantly shifting. The question is, what is power balance? Is it about influence? Is it about, because the power to influence isn't the same as holding the power. We were talking earlier about the fact that us being on this platform immediately makes it look like that we're the ones in charge with power, decision making. And yes, in our current roles, yes, we are. And in current roles, that's our duty and that's what we're responsible for and that's what we should be doing. But that decision making isn't us by ourselves. It has to be collaboratively.
But also there's kind of little rings around that too. So I've now got a reasonably powerful job within the disability arts sector. Never been employed outside disability arts. I've gone for other jobs, never got them. So I can be powerful, but I'm only allowed to be powerful within my little patch.
You know that there's no such thing as a male artist, yeah? There's no such thing as a white artist. Yet female artists exist, South Asian artists exist, black artists exist.
The ones you can get the books on.
Yeah.
And you're lucky. Disabled artists, we haven't even got a book. He's like, we're so far down the pecking line, we're not even there yet.
But it's funny, but also not funny, isn't it? Because, we were talking earlier, and I said I would love for that moment where we're not saying female artist, we're not saying brown artist, we're not saying disabled artist, but unfortunately, we need those labels right now in order to help create the change. It's what you were saying right at the beginning when you introduced yourself. It's about almost making unlimited obsolete. It shouldn't exist. And it feels like in order to kind of get to where you want to get to in your career, very reasonably, might I add, very reasonably, you must enter the room with your label. But actually, we should all just challenge stereotypes, full stop. We should all, if there's going to be a book on female artists, I'd like to say, who's up for writing a book on male artists? And which of those male artists would say, actually, yeah, I really want to be in that book? It's about perspective. It's very much about perspective. Our perspectives, whether we are, as an artist, if you are a woman, a man, South Asian, disabled, your perspective is what creates your work.
Yeah, and you can have multiple lenses, and you can twist your own little Rubik's Cube to showcase any of those at any one time. Some people say if I don't talk about disability all the time, then I'm being inauthentic. And it's kind of like, no, but I'm not just a disabled person. I'm also, a mother, a grandmother, somebody with a dog, somebody who really likes Death in Paradise. I'm all of those things. I'm not just one thing. And it's not inauthentic to embrace those other facets of my identity. I can't put down disability. It's inherent. It's part of my identity. But it doesn't mean that it's the totality of my experience.
I think one of the key things for us in Bradford is our intersectionality. We're incredibly intersectional, and it isn't always visible. We're just living it and we're being it. But actually, again, it's going to come time and time again back to telling our story and telling our narrative. For once, we have power. 20 years it's taken. I'm going to keep saying this. We finally are seen to have power and influence in Bradford. We were talking earlier about how many of our colleagues in the sector have travelled up north today to be part of this debate. And people have come from Bristol. I know how far away Bristol is, believe me, and my best friend lives there as well, so I know. And it's really interesting that not enough of our colleagues from London have made it up today. And the trains are running. So it's really interesting as it's a perception of where power is, how long power lasts for, because 2025 is 1 year. It's 1 year. And 2025, it delivered in the middle of Bradford's 10-year strategy. The council wrote, "Culture is our plan." Says it on the tin, on the front.
Great to have it in the middle and not at the end.
Exactly. Because once 2025, the year, culminates, we still have life after. That's a responsibility. We created a bid that looked at that responsibility. We are delivering a year that is looking at that responsibility. And the City of Culture is never delivered by itself. It is delivered in partnership with our friends in the district and wider in the UK, and yes, I'm going to say internationally as well. So we have a responsibility. Right now we have power and influence, and we're going to use it. We're going to use it. We're going to make it work for us, and we're going to make it last.
We do have power and influence, but it's relatively rare, and it can be relatively fleeting. I'm also really interested in the fact that we are, I think, within a degree of entrenched elitism. I do think that there are hierarchies within the arts. I do think there are hierarchies within the cultural commentators within the arts, within the funding structures, and I count ourselves as part of that too. Back in January, there was a front row episode. Are they episodes? I don't know. Where a respected cultural commentator, I'm not going to name him, you can ask me later, who was complaining about the Arts Council MPO decisions and said that they felt it was a disgrace that money had been taken away from Glyndebourne and given to disabled people, Albanian boat people, and juvenile delinquents. Nobody on front row challenged any of that. The conversation just moved on. So there's something about people who hold positions of power being able to say things, they're not challenged, our mechanisms aren't set up. That shouldn't be something that should be able to be said, let alone be said and not be challenged. I think I saw 3 tweets on Twitter about it, all from disabled people. Kind of going, hang on a minute, what was that? What was that? I mean, we're set up to, create international groundbreaking work, so it was particularly offensive to us. But I do think that elitism is really rooted within the sector, and I think it's also a generational thing. And I do think there are points, at some point I've got to step off because I'm going to be in danger of being that block, in the future.
It also goes to the point raised earlier about who calls themselves an artist. At what point do you feel like you can call yourself an artist? Do you need to have done a degree in any art form? Can you, why does the phrase outsider artist exist? That's a phrase in the visual art world, actually, that if you're not trained, that somehow your work sits over here. It doesn't sit within here. That the idea of is power balance, elitism, ambition, quality, sometimes it's all wrapped up and into one, particular kind of quite sometimes difficult to take package. But if you take them all apart and you start looking at them from the perspective of what we're all trying to do in our respective roles, you can start kind of tweaking them and playing with them a little bit. I often look at the relationship between artists and audiences, because that falls into a similar, kind of elitist trap. I met a theatre maker recently who said, I don't care about the audience. I just want to make what I want to make. And I said, are you sure you're not a visual artist? It's an interesting moment where and she went, I hadn't thought about it like that. It's very rare that I meet a theatre maker. Yep.
Hello. So yeah, just wanted to jump in. It makes me so angry about all these people who make arts, and of course there's arts as hobbies, etc. As a professional theatre maker, there's plenty of people. I've come up from London who make loads of theatre and they don't have to pay bills. They're living with parents. They are able to intern for years and then, etc., etc. None of these things are available to me. So just to drop into that, it's almost questioning how do people, obviously you both do amazing strategic stuff to be able to pay bills, and maybe ambition, quality. I hate to say the word money, and I know that it's set up here not to pick into that, but I'm going to be going back to London thinking, how do I write this ambition and quality application to bring in money?
So we moved the lowest level of our award up from 10k to 15k, because we don't believe that 10k enables you to create the thing that you should be able to create. We scrutinise budgets and insist that artists pay themselves union rates as a minimum. They're set as a minimum. They're not a maximum in any way, shape or form. We've linked freelancer pay to salaried staff pay. So if salaried staff pay goes up, freelancer pay has to go up as well. There's no point rewarding one part of an organisation and not rewarding another part that does just as vital kind of work. I think money is absolutely crucial. We've got a pay differential where I can't be paid, I think it's more than 5 times the rate of our lowest paid person. That's really important as well. There's no need for stupid salaries within the arts sector when people are living on a breadline. There's absolutely no need for it. Everybody gets living wage, even at trainee level, the highest level of that it can be. We are a sector, I'm really trying not to swear, we are a sector that screws over artists. Artists are the lifeblood of the arts sector and are the least powerful people within it. And that sucks. That really, really sucks. Every arts organisation needs to bring artists central as a value within their work to make sure that they are cared for and funded. We fund a lot of R&D work because I think a lot of work takes time and development at that early stage. In order to then reach the audiences, it needs to be tested out. It needs to be seen, is there an audience kind of for that? But money is central.
And in answer to your question, the very first thing that we did in 2025, the very first call out we did was to our artists in Bradford, starting again where it lands and matters the most at the beginning for us, is for them to actually have time to write the brief, to write the proposal, to respond to the themes. So not saying it's a lost leader. You're talking to an artist who's been a freelancer for most of her career. I've been on the hustle since the moment I started to practice, because we talk about the hustle, but we don't really, we all go, yeah, we all know it's the hustle. But how many of us actually really know how the art sector works? How many of us know the ratio of applications to success? And in Bradford, working class city, we've got so many working class voices that are from our communities. A lot of them can't afford to do an art degree now. 50, 60k debt, and you have no idea how, when you graduate, how do you even enter the sector? Forget opaque, there's just nothing there.
And it's worse, it's often, lots of disabled people do labour for nothing because of the benefit system and the benefits trap. So many artists on universal credit who are penalised if they go a penny over what they can potentially earn. So there's so much nuance that needs to be taken into account when paying people. And many organisations have inflexible finance systems that actually don't allow them to take that nuance on. It's really, really hard for artists just starting out to actually get onto that, that treadmill in the first place.
Even someone who sees themselves as a creative, as you were talking about, there's someone there with their hand up at the back, if we can give them a mic. This is a conversation, we're going to try and keep it as a conversation.
Hi, I'm lucky enough to run the Bradford Playhouse here in fabulous Bradford. And we work a lot with amateur dramatics, and I feel like that has a quality aspect attached to it. And what I want to say is that it's fantastic that people who want to be paid are paid, but I think it's also a massive thing, especially moving into City of Culture, that the people who work in those mills, who still work in those food factories, who work town planners, all sorts of fabulous volunteers, and people who want to be seen as artists, but also that's not their primary job, that's not their primary role in life. And like you said about your father in the house once a month and how hard it is to do that, I think we need to start concentrating on the fact that that has a quality and has so much ambition and is sometimes 10 times harder.
I don't think there's hard definitions. I think there's loads of people who do their art on a voluntary basis who absolutely are artists. The majority of artists I know don't earn their full-time living from being an artist because they can't afford to. But absolutely, I think we have denigrated the voluntary sector for decades, and that comes into the whole kind of quality debate really unfairly. And I think Let's Create is the start of really addressing that and actually saying, no, everybody has creativity in with them. You can choose how far you want to take that. It could be a vocational interest that takes you to that level. We don't want to put barriers in your way if that is how it is. It could also just be the way you spend your Friday night, and that's equally valid.
And also what you made the point earlier about audience, the piece that the Para Orchestra created, that was for a small audience. At what point is quality decided on size of audience? There are certain events, certain art forms, and certain moments where, of course, there's great, joyous kind of coming together of a large group of people, but equally there can be a joyous and kind of meaning and kind of a landing, an ambition in something that doesn't have 3,000 people, but actually has 300 people in the audience.
3 people?
Yep. So we need to start kind of giving that right and opportunity to all, different ways of experience and different kind of scale of experience. From a UK City of Culture perspective, something on a street can have meaning and scale. Something in somebody's street just as much as something in the mirror pool can have meaning and not have to be absolutely massive. Turning that idea a little bit on its head, what has meaning and what has spectacle, what has scale and what has depth. Being a lot more playful with it all.
Next question.
We can see nothing here. It's just lights.
Yeah, we can. We can do that. We can be your eyes for it.
Hi. Oh, Jesus. Coming back to the who gets to decide what is good, I love when we talk about young people, and I think probably 10 years later, I was thrilled and getting really excited about the fact that, I'm part of the young people group, but now it gets me a bit anxious at the same time when we talk about giving power to young people and hearing those voices. How do we, or how do you manage to find a balance between giving power to young people, but for that power not to become something that enhances the gap between young people and the elderly that are also kind of like a non-heard voice? And I don't know if I'm explaining myself properly.
One of my colleagues in the audience is probably going to say, Shanaz, normally you explain coming of age much, much better than you just did. which actually is that coming of age isn't just about our young people delivering that theme, but creative aging. I'm really interested in creative aging because actually you start aging. My mum always goes, why do you celebrate your birthdays? Because you're 1 year closer to, to getting older and getting more, kind of more fragile, more vulnerable, closer to, to being less able. Which I'm like, all right, that's a fair point. But I'm not going to be thinking about that at 18, 19, 20, 30, 40. I'm going to start thinking about that a little later. But we start aging, and therefore, at what point do we start thinking about creative aging? I'm really interested in cross-generational work. I think it's incredibly important to value all generations in our communities. As we get older, yes, we've had an entire life lived, but everyone still has aspirations, still has ambitions they want to deliver. Might not be change of world order, might just be the change that they want to see in their street. So my invitation to our young people is actually to work with all our generations, to actually work with the older generations and create that very much like cross-generational link. I just didn't explain that theme as well as I normally do. But I do have a question as well that you said that, is that your main anxiety? Because you said you were anxious about it.
Not my main anxiety, but definitely one of the sources of anxiety is, kind of like, because I'm in that middle where when people talk about young people, I'm like, yeah, I'm young, but then they see me as a mom. They call me like someone that is older. And so I can feel that gap of like, I'm not wise and old enough, but I'm also not young and fresh enough. So what the heck?
I feel it. I feel you, yeah.
I should say that in my experience as well, people come to the arts at all kinds of ages. So there are people who are young artists at 40.
It's at what time do you emerge? The phrase emerging art, Lubena Himid, she should have won a Turner Prize. I mean, Victoria Ryan, Veronica Ryan, again, at what point do we emerge?
We scrapped the word emerging. We used to have an emerging artist scheme, and so many people were getting offended by it. It's kind of like, no. So we look at small-scale awards or large-scale awards, and actually, a small-scale award isn't about just an R&D. It could be, but actually something could just be under 25k. A large-scale award could still be an R&D, but it could be a bigger process, a more expensive process. And the things are a lot of the ways in which we quantify the arts, young artists, emerging artists, R&D, they are nonsensical, and we're creating boxes that just tether us down rather than actually empowering us to be more creative.
I think also it is about recognising that we're at a point where a lot of working class people aren't coming through traditional routes into the arts.
Not just working class people, a lot of people from marginalised identities.
Absolutely. And there are other routes, there are other ways to begin to start kind of seeing your creativity, whether you want to deliver it and from a form of self, this is for me, like the artist said, this isn't about the audiences, this is all about me, great. Or you want to actually communicate with an audience and have that relationship with the audience as an artist. Whether you want to work backstage, dare I say it, post-COVID, what's happened to our technical, backstage, our front of house, in art galleries, we've had huge talent loss. If we do not become more visible to those who are interested in working in the arts but don't know how or what or where, but quite like the idea of it, we're going to shrink. It's getting harder and harder to recruit production managers, stage managers, front of house. There's plenty of people wanting to volunteer because they see the value of volunteering and being a part of the arts sector as a volunteer, but they don't see it as a career option.
Can we get another question, please?
Hi there. I've got a question about how we... So I think the arts and culture have quite a biased and well-established heritage and ways of doing things. And looking at ambition and quality from much more grassroots and perspective and community perspective is really powerful and useful. But, you know, as an organization that's funded by the Arts Council, and perhaps a question to you, Joe, you know, how we're kind of caught in the middle, aren't we, as when you get to a certain stage in our career, where you're sort of talking to the well-established, but also in the middle with what the marginalized communities or emerging communities, however you want to call them. You know, how do we kind of bridge that gap so that we can move forward together? I think in some ways some of us have been doing this for years and years and years, and it's getting to a point, it's getting quite tiring and difficult. But in some ways, Let's Create is an opportunity to kind of readdress some of these questions. But, you know, at the same time, what's the next step? How could we get there together?
One of the things our board talks about a lot is how do we, you know, dismantle the master's house when we've just bought the toolkit or just been given the master's toolkit. Kind of, you know, we're embedded within that sector now, but we can still challenge and provoke and annoy, irritate, galvanize change within that. We have to change the structures. For those who are really comfortable with the way that things have been, they are part of the problem. If you've been comfortable with the way things have been, then you've been comfortable with levels of discrimination, lack of representation. You know, otherwise, we wouldn't be in the situation we are now. So things have to change, and you have to join in that process of change, whether you like it or not. We've decided not to work with people who make us feel comfortable, but to work with many of our partners. We don't look for a values match, which is something you traditionally look for within a partnership. If we did, then we would narrow the pool of people we worked with to people that were really easy to work with. That's not going to create change within the cultural sector. So, because we like to make our lives difficult, we said no, a certain percentage of our partnerships will be with people we don't agree with. And our aim is to push them towards change. And, you know, but also it's not a one-way thing. It's also about finding out why are those ideas so entrenched? What part of them are they holding on to? What do we not know about them? Because if we don't know that, then we can't get people to give up their way of doing something. Is it that it's just particularly financially effective? Is it that it's all they know and that actually it's about broadening, you know, experiences? So it's got to be a two-way dialogue. We can't go into it with arrogance because that's not going to work. But we do have to go into it with an agenda to make change and to be really clear about that and say, you know, this is because we want you to change this. So anybody that we work in partnership with, we go, right, 20% of your programming, 20% of your staffing, what are you doing? Even if we're just like working on a project over here, what are you doing to address those things? We have to ask those questions.
We haven't got much time. We've got, I think, time for 2 questions, and I'm going to pass the mic to the person in the second row.
Thank you. Just something coming back to what Joe was saying right at the start, but it keeps coming up, is around making yourself redundant or obsolete. I think that seeing change at kind of like an organizational purpose, mission level is quite easy because it's big. But actually those changes, that obsoleteness happens, it's like a fractal. There's all sorts of examples within every process, within every organization, with every transaction and conversation where there's an opportunity to embed the way you work so that those barriers keep getting removed from all those tiny little, whether it's the way you do meetings or the way you set up conversations or the partners that you choose or the artists that you choose to engage with. Every single process can be looked at through that lens. So I think from an organizational point of view, that work is so detailed, as well as that big stuff, like changing the sector, challenging the sector. So it's just something I find myself constantly reflecting on all the different ways that we can try to make that change within every single thing we do. So I thought that was something that I wanted to share.
And I think everybody should be looking to make themselves redundant. It's kind of, everything has a lifespan. We get so upset when things close. We get so angry and so, we all spout out loads of guff around it. And it's kind of like, actually, nature, everything dies. It's part of that process. We can't have new, fresh, unless we also have, death. Doesn't mean we don't have to grieve, doesn't mean we don't have to go through some of the rituals around that. But there's some brilliant work being done on, that process, that closing process at the moment. I'd love to see, a third of the arts sector close every 5 years.
And death,
what
death
change
doesn't,
would that
death
be?
doesn't have to be the end either.
It's everything has a cycle, doesn't it? And everything has a lifespan. And we talk about portfolio careers. If you're a solo artist or an SME, that you have to do more than one thing. You introduce yourself at the beginning as an artist, producer, so on and so forth. And that's about kind of at points you shift what you're doing, how you're doing it. Everything has a lifespan. It comes to the end of its lifespan, celebrate that moment and go, right, what's going to be next? So I think everything you're saying, absolutely. Every way a meeting is done, like Joe and I were both laughing, that we're sat on the right side of each other's hearing need. Anybody stands here next to me, I'm not going to hear you. Joe's not going to hear you, but we immediately were like understood, and we were like, okay, so we're sat on the right side.
Good to note for meal times or various things like that. If you're sat this side of me, I'll ignore you.
And that fact that you start a meeting by saying, is everybody where they need to be? And for us, immediately, that kind of makes us equal to everyone who's in that space and in that room. Because up until that moment, you have to do the work yourself. So it starts off with that. But that might not just be about a hearing. It might be the way somebody needs to see, the way somebody wants to engage, how we set up our processes, what our processes are, who is going to learn. And I'm talking to you about, we're going through, that moment where we're setting up processes and systems, where that early, in our journey, trying to make sure that we bring different types of learning with us, who's, trying to kind of create that space. So small changes create the big changes. And we never stop changing.
Yeah, and it's not just about the quality of the art, it's about the quality of the infrastructure of the systems that support the art as well.
Just think how annoying a mosquito can be and the amount of change a mosquito makes. They're tiny.
Got time for one more question. I think there's someone further up.
Hello there. I just wanted to talk about the ambition quality part, when you spoke about your family gathering and the folk songs that they'd sing together. As a South Asian artist who makes work for a South Asian audience that I think is easily ignored by the sector, people like my grandparents, people like my parents, who don't necessarily always speak English. So I make a piece of work that I think will speak to them primarily. And as an inclusive artist, I try and make sure that it's open to everyone else. Now, it might be a situation where not everyone will get what I'm making, and that's okay. And I think that we should allow that, because at the same time, when I take my parents or my grandparents to watch something, they'll come out saying, this is something you should never bring me to. And that's also okay. So I think that that question around quality and who is it for and who's assessing it is really, really vital in this age when we really should be discussing it's okay if this particular audience doesn't like it or if the reviewer doesn't like it, because who the work was made for, they love it.
I completely agree. Not everything made is for everybody, and we can be confident in that. Even I have to be honest, even I would come out of those folk sessions going, that's not for me. That's for that very particular audience, but it works for that audience. There are some works, there are some art forms that are very accessible because they're visual. They're outdoors. There's not even that barrier of going into a venue, because even seeing a venue as an art venue as something that is for you. I took my parents to the Hepworth when it first, I think it just opened in the first 6 months. There was a photo shoot. That was the guise in which I get my parents anyway. There's always a reason to get them there. And my mum was wearing a shalwar kameez. And, you know, that's who she is. That's what she wears. That's what she's comfortable in. And as we were walking over the bridge, those of you who know the Hepworth, you know you're approaching it and it's the bridge. My mum's looking at everybody. And she said to me, I don't belong here. And I went, what do you mean, Mum? She goes, you do, because look at the way you're dressed. Your daughter does and your father does. I don't belong here because no one here is dressed like me. And I went, yeah, but you're here with me, and that's why you're here, and I've brought you here. And she went, no, nobody looks like me. And then we went in, had the photo shoot, and my mother, we stood there having the photo taken, my mother just leaned over, and I got Martin Parr to take the picture. And those of you who know Martin Parr, he doesn't like you smiling. And neither does my mother. She looks like, Queen Victoria on a good day. And my mother just leaned over, and there was all these lovely young women from the marketing team taking photos, because sure enough, my mother's the only woman wearing a shalwar kameez. Not just the fact that she's brown, you know, I was there, my daughter was there was a few other people there. She's wearing a shalwar kameez, extra brownie points. And there was these young women taking the photo. And my mum just leaned over and said, you need to tell them I charge. And we have a photo by Martin Parr where we're smiling because we were corpsing. And my dad was mortified. He was like, Martin Parr stood there taking our photo. You're so embarrassing me. And all of you are laughing. But intelligence, my mum's illiterate, but intelligence is not just education. Intelligence is seeing the world. All of us see and interact with the world from our very, very different perspectives. And we need to embrace that. And we need to respect that.
Joe, did you want to respond? We've got time.
No, I was just thinking that it's exactly the same. For a wheelchair user goes into a venue and you can see the buzz around the marketing department. It's like, we've got to get a picture, because then we can put it on the website, and we've got one of the visible ones out there. It's like most disabled people have, invisible or hidden impairments, but there's absolutely a buzz that kind of goes round. And that tokenization stays with you. It's really hard to get rid of. It's really hard to kind of put down. You don't feel that it's one of the things that really makes you not feel like you belong. And you can spot when those photographs are not an authentic kind of thing. But absolutely, anybody can make art, but not everybody believes they can make art. And I think the job for the next generation of people involved in creating art is to really keep widening that pool. I think it started. I think Let's Create is a great tool for that, but that's only going to work if we genuinely believe it and we genuinely make that part of our core missions.
Thank you. Can we show our appreciation, please, for Shanaz and Joe?